Speak, influence. Succeed is your blueprint for mastering ethical persuasion, unshakable confidence, and meaningful communication that leaves a lasting impact in every conversation. Published by Enlight Audiobook, this modern guide transforms influence into a skill anyone can develop. Introduction. The most influential moments in life are rarely determined by who speaks the loudest. They are shaped by those who know how to earn trust, inspire confidence, and guide others with clarity and purpose. Every opportunity, whether in business, leadership, relationships, or everyday conversations, is influenced by an invisible force that often matters more than talent alone, the ability to connect before attempting to convince. Persuasion is frequently misunderstood as manipulation, yet genuine influence is built on honesty, empathy, credibility, and understanding. People are not persuaded because they are pressured. They are persuaded because they feel heard, respected, and confident in the person standing before them. The strongest communicators do not force agreement. They create an atmosphere where trust naturally opens the door to meaningful action. This book is your guide to developing that ability. It will show you how confidence shapes first impressions, how psychology influences decisions, how language changes outcomes, and how authentic communication creates lasting impact. More importantly, it will help you understand that influence is not an inborn talent reserved for a fortunate few. It is a practical skill that can be refined through awareness, intention, and consistent practice. As you turn these pages, you are not simply learning how to persuade others. You are learning how to become the kind of person people naturally trust, remember, and willingly follow. Speak with purpose, influence with integrity, and let every conversation become an opportunity to create positive and lasting change. Chapter 1. Influence begins before you speak. A conversation never truly begins with the first sentence. It begins with an invisible exchange that unfolds long before words are chosen, where confidence is quietly measured, intentions are instinctively assessed, and trust starts forming in the space between presence and perception. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to draw conclusions within moments of meeting someone, relying not on detailed analysis, but on subtle signals that the conscious mind barely notices. A calm posture, steady eye contact, composed movements, and genuine warmth communicate messages that language alone can never fully express. This silent dialogue often determines whether an idea is welcomed or resisted before it has even been spoken. Many people believe they struggle to persuade because they have not yet discovered the perfect words, yet the real obstacle frequently lies elsewhere. Influence is not built upon eloquence alone. It is rooted in the character that others perceive beneath every sentence. Confidence, however, should never be mistaken for loudness or dominance. Authentic confidence does not seek attention because it naturally commands respect. It is reflected in quiet certainty, thoughtful composure, and the willingness to listen as carefully as one speaks. These qualities create psychological safety, encouraging others to lower their defenses and become receptive rather than skeptical. The most persuasive individuals understand that every interaction is shaped by energy before argument, by credibility before explanation, and by emotional presence before evidence. This principle has revealed itself repeatedly throughout history, not only in celebrated leaders, but also in ordinary people whose quiet confidence transformed extraordinary moments. Consider the remarkable journey of Satya Nadella when he assumed leadership of Microsoft at a time when many believed the company had lost its innovative spirit. He did not begin by delivering fiery speeches or attempting to overpower his organization with authority. Instead, he cultivated an atmosphere of curiosity, humility, and genuine respect. Employees who had grown accustomed to internal competition gradually experienced a different kind of leadership, one that encouraged collaboration over ego and learning over certainty. Nadella's calm presence, thoughtful listening, and consistent authenticity altered the emotional climate of an entire company before many of his strategic decisions had fully taken shape. His influence did not arise from commanding louder meetings or presenting more impressive arguments. It emerged because people sensed integrity behind his words and confidence behind his vision. That transformation eventually helped reshape Microsoft's culture, restore innovation, and rebuild trust across teams and customers alike. The lesson reaches far beyond the walls of a global corporation. Every person enters conversations carrying an invisible reputation created by habits, emotional discipline, and self-belief. A confident presence reassures others that they are engaging with someone dependable, while uncertainty often spreads just as quickly through hesitant gestures, restless movements, or inconsistent behavior. This reality should never be viewed as a reason for anxiety, but as an invitation to cultivate greater self-awareness. Presence is not something reserved for gifted speakers or charismatic personalities. It is developed gradually through intentional practice, emotional maturity, and the decision to align outward behavior with inward conviction. When your thoughts become clearer, your posture naturally becomes steadier. When your values become stronger, your voice gains quiet authority. When your confidence is grounded in preparation rather than pride, people begin to trust not merely what you say, but who you are. Long before your ideas have an opportunity to persuade, your presence has already begun speaking on your behalf, and in many cases, it is that silent introduction which determines whether your words will merely be heard or genuinely remembered. The remarkable truth about influence is that it cannot be borrowed from titles, expensive clothing, impressive qualifications, or carefully rehearsed speeches. Those external advantages may capture attention for a brief moment, but lasting influence is sustained by something far more enduring: consistency between what people see and what they eventually experience. Every interaction either strengthens or weakens that consistency. When actions repeatedly reinforce words, credibility begins to accumulate like compound interest, quietly growing stronger with every encounter. Conversely, when promises exceed performance, even the most persuasive language gradually loses its power. This explains why the individuals who leave the deepest impression are rarely those who strive to appear extraordinary. They are those who remain remarkably authentic, regardless of the audience or circumstance. Authenticity possesses a magnetic quality because it removes uncertainty. People instinctively recognize when someone is trying too hard to impress, just as they recognize the quiet assurance of someone who has nothing to prove. That distinction transforms conversations. Instead of feeling like a performance, communication becomes an exchange built on mutual respect, where ideas are explored rather than imposed. Such influence is neither accidental nor mysterious. It is cultivated through countless small decisions to remain composed under pressure, to replace reaction with thoughtful response, and to approach every conversation with genuine curiosity rather than the desire to dominate it. One of the most underestimated elements of this process is attentive listening. Many people enter conversations preparing their next response before the other person has even finished speaking, believing that influence belongs to whoever delivers the strongest argument. In reality, influence often belongs to the person who understands the unspoken concerns hidden beneath the words. Every individual carries hopes, fears, ambitions, and doubts that are not immediately visible. Listening with patience allows those invisible layers to emerge, creating an atmosphere where people feel respected instead of judged. Once that emotional connection is established, persuasion becomes remarkably natural because trust has already laid the foundation. This is why the finest communicators ask thoughtful questions before offering confident answers. They recognize that understanding another person's perspective is not a pause in the persuasive process. It is the persuasive process itself. Presence, therefore, extends beyond physical appearance or confident posture. It is the ability to remain fully engaged in the moment without allowing distractions, insecurities, or assumptions to interrupt genuine connection. A distracted mind produces distracted communication, whereas a focused presence communicates value before a single opinion is expressed. Consider how differently people respond to someone who maintains calm eye contact, listens without interruption, and responds with deliberate clarity instead of hurried certainty. Such behavior quietly signals emotional maturity, inviting cooperation rather than resistance. These habits may appear ordinary in isolation, yet together they shape an identity that others naturally trust and remember. Every meaningful conversation becomes an opportunity to strengthen that identity, proving through behavior what words alone can never guarantee. Influence, then, is not a destination reached through one extraordinary performance, but a reputation built through hundreds of ordinary moments, handled with exceptional intention. Each greeting, each conversation, each disagreement, and each act of attentive listening adds another brushstroke to the portrait people create of you in their minds. That portrait ultimately speaks louder than any presentation, negotiation, or carefully crafted message. When your presence consistently reflects confidence without arrogance, empathy without weakness, and conviction without stubbornness, people begin to lower their defenses almost effortlessly. They listen more openly, respond more positively, and remember you long after the conversation has ended. Before mastering persuasive language, master the silent qualities that give language its credibility, for the strongest voice in any room is rarely the loudest one. It is the one whose character has already spoken before the first word is ever uttered. Chapter 2. Why people really say yes. Every decision begins as an emotion long before it becomes a conclusion. The human mind enjoys believing that it weighs evidence with perfect objectivity, carefully examining every fact before arriving at a rational choice. Yet beneath that reassuring belief lies a far more fascinating reality. The brain is constantly searching for certainty, safety, familiarity, and meaning, quietly assembling impressions from countless invisible cues before logic is invited into the conversation. By the time a person explains why they accepted an idea, purchased a product, trusted a leader, or embraced a new opportunity, much of the decision has already been shaped by feelings that operated beyond conscious awareness. Logic often serves as the eloquent narrator of a story that emotion has already written. This truth is not a weakness of human nature, but one of its greatest strengths, allowing people to navigate an endlessly complex world without becoming overwhelmed by endless analysis. Understanding this hidden process transforms persuasion from an attempt to out-argue others into the far more meaningful pursuit of understanding how people genuinely think, feel, and decide. Trust stands at the center of every meaningful decision because uncertainty has always been one of humanity's greatest psychological discomforts. Whenever people encounter something unfamiliar, their minds instinctively begin asking silent questions. Can this person be believed? Are their intentions genuine? Do they understand my concerns? Will following this advice make my life better or expose me to unnecessary risk? These questions are rarely spoken aloud, yet they quietly influence every interaction. No collection of impressive statistics or beautifully structured arguments can overcome the absence of trust. Facts may inform the intellect, but trust calms uncertainty, and a calm mind becomes far more willing to explore new possibilities. This explains why the same message can produce completely different outcomes depending on who delivers it. People are often persuaded less by the information itself than by the confidence they place in the individual presenting it. The most influential communicators understand that credibility is never demanded. It is accumulated through consistency. Every promise honored, every thoughtful response, and every act of genuine integrity becomes another reason for others to believe not only in the message, but also in the messenger. Credibility resembles a bridge constructed one careful stone at a time. Each honest interaction strengthens its foundation until people feel comfortable crossing into unfamiliar territory simply because they trust the guide leading them there. Once that bridge exists, persuasion no longer feels like pressure, it feels like partnership. Instead of defending their existing beliefs, people become curious enough to consider new perspectives because they no longer fear being manipulated or misunderstood. One of the clearest demonstrations of this principle can be found in the remarkable rise of Airbnb during its earliest years. When the company first invited travelers to sleep in the homes of complete strangers, the idea appeared unreasonable to many people. Common sense suggested that most individuals would never place such trust in someone they had never met. The founders recognized that the greatest obstacle was not price, convenience, or technology. It was uncertainty. Rather than relying solely on persuasive advertising, they focused on building systems that allowed trust to grow naturally. Detailed host profiles, verified identities, authentic photographs, transparent reviews, and honest ratings gradually replaced fear with familiarity. Every positive experience shared by real customers became powerful social proof, reassuring future travelers that thousands of ordinary people had already taken the same step successfully. As confidence spread from one satisfied guest to another, hesitation slowly gave way to acceptance. What had once seemed risky eventually became normal for millions around the world. The transformation was driven less by clever persuasion than by reducing uncertainty through trust and shared human experience. Airbnb did not convince people to ignore their fears. It patiently replaced fear with evidence that others had already discovered safety, value, and belonging. This example reveals an enduring principle of human psychology. People naturally look towards the behavior of others whenever uncertainty clouds their own judgment. Social proof is not simply imitation, it is the brain's efficient way of reducing perceived risk. When countless individuals choose a particular restaurant, recommend a book, applaud a speaker, or support a meaningful cause, observers instinctively assume that so many independent decisions are unlikely to be accidental. This tendency influences nearly every area of life, from everyday purchases to career choices and personal relationships. The desire to belong and the desire to feel secure often work together, quietly encouraging people to follow paths that others have already traveled with confidence. Wise communicators recognize this instinct without exploiting it. Rather than manufacturing artificial popularity, they allow genuine experiences, authentic testimonials, and consistent value to speak for themselves. Influence becomes far more sustainable when people are persuaded by truth instead of illusion. Equally powerful is the principle of reciprocity, a quiet force that has strengthened human communities for generations. Whenever someone receives unexpected kindness, sincere generosity, or thoughtful support, a subtle desire to respond in kind begins to emerge. This impulse is not merely a social custom, but a deeply rooted psychological tendency that reinforces cooperation and mutual trust. The most respected leaders, mentors, and professionals understand that meaningful influence often begins by giving before asking, serving before leading, and contributing before expecting anything in return. Generosity creates emotional momentum because it communicates abundance rather than desperation. It tells others that the relationship matters more than the transaction, and that simple shift in perception frequently becomes the beginning of genuine influence. Reciprocity alone, however, is rarely enough to inspire lasting commitment. Human beings also possess a deep psychological desire to remain consistent with the beliefs, promises, and identities they have publicly embraced. Once people view themselves as honest, responsible, generous, or ambitious, they naturally seek opportunities to behave in ways that reinforce that identity. This explains why small commitments often lead to far greater ones over time. A person who chooses to adopt one positive habit is more likely to embrace another because each decision strengthens the story they tell themselves about who they are becoming. Effective persuasion recognizes this quiet dialogue taking place within every mind. Instead of asking others to make dramatic leaps, it invites them to take meaningful steps that feel aligned with their existing values and aspirations. When an idea complements a person's identity rather than threatening it, resistance gradually dissolves and willingness begins to grow. Another force that quietly shapes decision-making is scarcity. Opportunities that appear limited often become more valuable in the human imagination, not necessarily because they possess greater quality, but because the possibility of losing them awakens an emotional response. Throughout history, people have attached greater significance to what seems rare, exclusive, or fleeting. Yet ethical persuasion never manufactures false urgency or manipulates fear of missing out. Instead, it simply helps people recognize the genuine value of opportunities that may not remain available forever. Time itself is scarce. Attention is scarce. Meaningful relationships are scarce. Exceptional opportunities are scarce. Appreciating scarcity encourages thoughtful decisions, whereas exploiting it encourages impulsive ones. The difference reflects the integrity of the communicator. Lasting influence always seeks to illuminate reality rather than distort it. The greatest communicators understand that persuasion is not about defeating another person's objections, but about understanding the emotions that created those objections in the first place. Every hesitation conceals a concern waiting to be acknowledged. Every doubt represents an unanswered question rather than an obstacle to overcome. Many conversations fail because people respond to spoken words while ignoring the emotions beneath them. Someone expressing uncertainty about a proposal may actually be seeking reassurance. A reluctant customer may be protecting themselves from disappointment. A hesitant colleague may fear criticism more than change itself. When communicators learn to recognize these emotional undercurrents, they stop viewing disagreement as conflict and begin seeing it as an invitation to build deeper understanding. This shift transforms persuasion into collaboration, replacing pressure with empathy and argument with meaningful dialogue. Confidence also plays an extraordinary role in the psychology of influence, yet its true power is frequently misunderstood. Genuine confidence is not an attempt to appear flawless or infallible. It is the quiet certainty that allows someone to remain composed without becoming defensive when challenged. People instinctively trust individuals who are willing to acknowledge uncertainty, admit mistakes, and remain open to better ideas because such behavior reflects inner security rather than fragile pride. Ironically, pretending to know everything often weakens credibility, while demonstrating thoughtful humility strengthens it. Confidence combined with humility creates a rare balance that encourages people to listen without suspicion. It communicates strength without intimidation and conviction without arrogance, making influence feel reassuring instead of overwhelming. Every memorable conversation is shaped by another powerful principle that is often overlooked. People remember how they felt long after they forget the precise words that were spoken. Facts may fade with time, but emotions leave lasting impressions. A conversation that leaves someone feeling respected, understood, encouraged or inspired continues influencing their perception long after specific details disappear from memory. This is why extraordinary communicators invest as much attention in creating positive emotional experiences as they do in presenting compelling information. They recognize that persuasion is not measured by how much they speak, but by how deeply their message resonates within another person's mind and heart. The emotional atmosphere surrounding a conversation frequently becomes more influential than the conversation itself. Perhaps the most liberating lesson of all is that influence does not belong exclusively to charismatic personalities, celebrated leaders, or gifted speakers. Every individual possesses the capacity to become more persuasive by developing greater self-awareness, emotional intelligence, integrity, and genuine curiosity about others. These qualities cannot be purchased, borrowed, or memorized overnight, but they can be strengthened through deliberate practice until they become a natural part of one's character. The purpose of persuasion is not to win every conversation or convince every person. Its higher purpose is to create understanding where confusion exists, trust where uncertainty prevails, and possibility where hesitation once stood. When influence is guided by honesty, empathy, and respect, people rarely feel that they have been persuaded at all. Instead, they feel that they have discovered a better path through their own understanding. That is the highest form of persuasion, for it does not merely change decisions, it strengthens relationships, deepens confidence, and leaves both people better than they were before the conversation began. Chapter 3. Master the language of influence. Language does far more than describe reality. It quietly shapes the reality people choose to believe. Every sentence has the potential to open a door or build a wall, to invite curiosity or awaken resistance, to strengthen trust or slowly erode it. The remarkable communicators who leave lasting impressions understand that influence is rarely hidden inside sophisticated vocabulary or perfectly rehearsed speeches. Instead, it lives within the thoughtful selection of words that make people feel understood rather than instructed. A single phrase spoken with empathy can dissolve tension that endless explanations fail to overcome, while one careless sentence can undo years of credibility. This is why mastering the language of influence begins not with speaking more, but with becoming intentional about every word that leaves your mouth. Words are not merely sounds arranged into sentences, they are emotional signals that shape perception, guide decisions, and quietly influence how people remember both the message and the messenger. Every conversation, therefore, becomes an opportunity to create clarity instead of confusion, confidence instead of doubt, and connection instead of distance. One of the greatest misconceptions about persuasive communication is the belief that powerful speakers always have powerful answers. In reality, the most influential communicators often possess something even more valuable: powerful questions. Questions invite participation where statements often create resistance. They encourage people to explore ideas rather than defend existing opinions. A thoughtful question gently shifts the mind from confrontation to reflection, allowing individuals to arrive at conclusions through their own reasoning instead of feeling pressured to accept someone else's viewpoint. People naturally trust conclusions they believe they have discovered themselves because those conclusions become part of their own thinking rather than borrowed opinions. Influence becomes remarkably effective when communication feels like collaboration rather than persuasion. This principle was demonstrated with extraordinary effectiveness by Indra Nooyi during her tenure as Chief Executive Officer of PepsiCo. Known for her calm presence and exceptional communication skills, she rarely relied on authority alone to gain support for ambitious ideas. When introducing major strategic changes, She did not begin by demanding agreement or overwhelming people with statistics. Instead, she invested time in understanding the concerns of employees, investors, and colleagues through meaningful conversations. She framed change not as a threat to what people valued, but as an opportunity to protect the company's future while preserving its strengths. Rather than asking people to abandon the familiar, she invited them to imagine what the organization could become if it adapted with purpose and confidence. Her careful choice of language transformed uncertainty into possibility. Employees felt included instead of instructed. Stakeholders recognized a shared vision instead of a personal agenda, and difficult conversations gradually evolved into collective commitment. The success of her leadership was shaped not only by strategic decisions, but by her ability to communicate those decisions with clarity, respect, and emotional intelligence. Her example reminds us that influence grows strongest when words illuminate opportunity instead of amplifying fear, because people willingly support ideas that honor both their intelligence and their aspirations. The true power of language is revealed not when everything is going well, but when conversations become difficult. Moments of disagreement often tempt people to speak faster, defend their opinions more aggressively, or overwhelm others with facts in the hope that stronger arguments will produce better outcomes. Yet persuasion rarely flourishes in an atmosphere of emotional pressure. When individuals feel attacked, the mind instinctively shifts from curiosity to self-protection, making even the strongest evidence far less effective. Influential communicators recognize this psychological shift and deliberately choose words that lower defenses instead of raising them. They replace absolute statements with thoughtful possibilities, exchanging phrases such as, "You're wrong," for "Let's explore another perspective," or "That will never work," for "How could we make this stronger?" These subtle adjustments may appear insignificant, yet they transform the emotional climate of a conversation. Respect encourages openness, while judgment invites resistance. The objective is never to win an argument, but to create an environment where better ideas can emerge naturally. Equally important is the ability to frame ideas in a way that connects with another person's aspirations, rather than merely presenting information. Facts explain, but meaning inspires. Whenever people encounter a new proposal, they unconsciously ask a simple question: why does this matter to me? Effective communicators answer that question before it is spoken. They link ideas to shared goals, personal values, or meaningful outcomes, allowing listeners to see themselves within the future being described. This is why memorable speeches, inspiring leaders, and trusted mentors rarely rely on complicated language. Their words are clear, purposeful, and emotionally resonant because clarity creates confidence, and confidence encourages action. Simplicity should never be mistaken for a lack of sophistication. It is often the highest expression of mastery. The ability to explain profound ideas in language that everyone can understand reflects deep understanding rather than shallow thinking. Listening also deserves recognition as one of the most persuasive forms of communication. Genuine listening is not passive silence while waiting for an opportunity to speak. It is an active demonstration of respect that communicates without a single persuasive phrase that another person's thoughts and feelings have value. People become far more receptive when they believe they have been fully heard, because listening satisfies one of the deepest human desires, the need to be understood. Once that emotional need has been met, conversations naturally become more collaborative, creative, and productive. Words then cease to function as weapons designed to defeat opposing opinions, and instead become bridges connecting different perspectives. Every conversation offers a choice between creating distance or creating understanding, and that choice is made one sentence at a time. Mastering the language of influence therefore begins long before searching for impressive expressions. It begins with the discipline to choose words that illuminate rather than intimidate, encourage rather than criticize, and unite rather than divide. When language is guided by empathy, clarity, and integrity, every conversation becomes more than an exchange of ideas. It becomes an opportunity to leave another person feeling wiser, more confident, and genuinely valued. Chapter 4. Build instant trust. Trust is never announced the moment it arrives, yet its absence is noticed almost immediately. It develops quietly beneath ordinary conversations, strengthening through countless moments that appear insignificant on their own, but become remarkably powerful when woven together over time. Every promise that is honored, every action that reflects integrity, and every conversation guided by sincerity adds another layer to a foundation that no persuasive technique can replace. Many people devote years to refining their communication skills while overlooking the one quality that gives every word its true authority. Without trust, even brilliant ideas are met with hesitation. With trust, however, simple words can inspire extraordinary action because people no longer question the intentions of the person speaking. This is why the world's most respected leaders, entrepreneurs, mentors, and change-makers rarely begin by asking others to believe in their vision. They first become individuals worthy of belief. Credibility is earned long before influence is exercised, and character quietly becomes the language that speaks, even when no words are being exchanged. One of the greatest misconceptions about trust is that it depends upon perfection. In reality, perfection often creates distance, while authenticity builds connection. People are naturally drawn towards those who demonstrate honesty about their strengths without pretending to be flawless. A leader who acknowledges uncertainty while remaining committed to finding solutions frequently earns greater confidence than someone who insists on appearing infallible. This quiet authenticity communicates emotional security rather than weakness. It tells others that truth is valued more highly than appearance and that relationships matter more than personal pride. Such behavior lowers emotional barriers because it gives others permission to be equally genuine. Conversations become more meaningful when neither person feels compelled to wear a carefully constructed mask. Authenticity transforms communication from performance into partnership, allowing trust to grow naturally rather than being forced through carefully rehearsed impressions. Empathy strengthens this foundation by allowing people to feel understood before they are persuaded. Every individual carries invisible experiences, personal challenges, and private aspirations that influence how they interpret the world. These hidden realities rarely appear in spoken language, yet they shape every reaction, decision, and emotion. The ability to recognize those unseen dimensions distinguishes remarkable communicators from ordinary ones. Empathy is not agreement with every opinion, nor is it the abandonment of one's own convictions. It is the discipline of understanding another person's perspective deeply enough to appreciate why they think and feel as they do. Once people experience that understanding, resistance often softens because they no longer feel the need to defend themselves against misunderstanding. Respect opens doors that argument alone could never unlock. Closely connected to empathy is the often overlooked discipline of active listening. Genuine listening requires far more than remaining silent while another person speaks. It demands complete attention, thoughtful observation, and the willingness to set aside personal assumptions long enough to understand what is truly being communicated. The most influential individuals listen not merely for information, but for meaning. They notice hesitation hidden beneath confident words, enthusiasm concealed behind cautious language, and concern expressed through subtle changes in tone. Such awareness allows them to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. People instinctively trust those who make them feel heard because attentive listening communicates something profoundly valuable. Your thoughts matter. Few experiences create stronger human connection than the feeling of being genuinely understood. Long after specific conversations fade from memory, people continue remembering how another person made them feel, and that emotional memory quietly becomes the birthplace of lasting trust. Trust also depends upon consistency, a quality that quietly distinguishes reliable individuals from merely impressive ones. Grand promises may capture attention for a moment, but dependable actions sustain confidence over a lifetime. Every interaction offers an opportunity either to reinforce or diminish the confidence others place in us. When words repeatedly align with behavior, certainty begins to replace doubt, and people gradually stop questioning motives because experience has already answered those questions. This quiet reliability creates an invisible reputation that enters every conversation before we do. It is not built through occasional acts of excellence, but through the disciplined habit of showing up with the same integrity, respect, and professionalism, regardless of circumstances. Character, after all, reveals itself most clearly when recognition is absent and convenience invites compromise. Those who remain faithful to their principles even in unnoticed moments become the people others instinctively trust when important decisions must be made. Patience is another essential ingredient in the architecture of trust. Modern life often encourages immediate results, instant responses, and rapid conclusions, yet meaningful relationships refuse to follow that hurried timetable. Confidence cannot be demanded, and credibility cannot be accelerated. Like the steady growth of a mighty oak from a single acorn, trust develops through repeated experiences that gradually remove uncertainty. Attempting to force it usually produces the opposite effect, creating suspicion where openness might otherwise have flourished. Wise communicators therefore understand that every honest conversation, every fulfilled commitment, and every respectful disagreement contributes another layer to a relationship that will eventually become resilient enough to withstand misunderstanding, disappointment, and change. They recognize that influence built patiently is influence built to endure. Humility further strengthens this process because it keeps confidence anchored in wisdom rather than ego. There is remarkable strength in admitting that another person has offered a valuable perspective or that a better solution has emerged through collaboration. Such moments never diminish credibility, they expand it. People naturally respect those who value truth above personal recognition because that attitude reflects emotional maturity rather than insecurity. Humility creates space for dialogue instead of domination, replacing the desire to prove oneself right with the desire to discover what is right. In that atmosphere, conversations become opportunities for mutual growth rather than contests to determine a winner. Trust flourishes wherever people feel respected instead of measured, appreciated instead of judged, and included instead of controlled. Ultimately, instant trust is rarely created in a single extraordinary moment. It is recognized in the quiet accumulation of ordinary moments handled with extraordinary integrity. Every smile offered sincerely, every promise faithfully honored, every interruption resisted, and every act of genuine empathy leaves an impression that words alone could never achieve. These seemingly modest choices gradually shape a reputation that precedes every introduction and strengthens every conversation. People may initially admire talent, intelligence, or achievement, but they choose to follow those whose character consistently reflects honesty, compassion, and reliability. Trust is therefore not simply the foundation of influence, it is its greatest multiplier. When people believe in your intentions, they become more willing to believe in your ideas. When they trust your character, they naturally become more receptive to your guidance. Build trust before seeking agreement, nurture relationships before pursuing results, and let integrity become the quiet signature behind every conversation. In doing so, you will discover that the most persuasive voice is not the one that speaks with the greatest volume, but the one whose actions have already given every word unquestionable credibility. Chapter 5. Influence through emotion. Emotions rarely ask for permission before shaping the direction of a conversation. They arrive quietly, coloring every thought, influencing every judgment, and determining whether a message is welcomed with curiosity or dismissed with hesitation. Long before the mind begins weighing evidence, the heart has already decided whether it feels safe, respected, inspired, or threatened. This invisible process explains why two people can hear the same words yet leave with entirely different conclusions. One remembers encouragement while another recalls criticism. One discovers opportunity while another notices only uncertainty. The difference is seldom found in the information itself, but in the emotional experience surrounding it. Mastering influence therefore requires far more than learning persuasive language. It requires learning how to create emotional environments where trust can flourish and understanding can naturally emerge. The finest communicators recognize that every conversation carries two messages at once: the words that are spoken and the feelings they quietly awaken. When those two messages support one another, influence becomes effortless because people no longer feel they are being persuaded. Instead, they feel understood. Emotional intelligence begins with the discipline of recognizing emotions before reacting to them. Every individual enters a conversation carrying invisible experiences that shape their responses. A stressful morning, an unresolved disappointment, a recent success, or an unspoken fear may influence a person's behavior far more than the topic itself. Those who overlook these emotional realities often misinterpret hesitation as stubbornness or silence as indifference. Those who recognize them respond with patience rather than frustration. They understand that behavior is frequently the visible expression of emotions that remain hidden beneath the surface. This awareness transforms communication because it replaces assumptions with curiosity and judgment with compassion. Instead of asking why someone is difficult, emotionally intelligent communicators quietly wonder what unseen pressure that person may be carrying. Such a perspective immediately changes the tone of a conversation, allowing empathy to replace conflict before disagreement has an opportunity to grow. Equally important is the ability to manage one's own emotional responses. Confidence loses much of its persuasive power when it is overshadowed by impatience, defensiveness, or uncontrolled frustration. A composed individual possesses an extraordinary advantage because emotional stability quietly reassures everyone else in the room. Calmness is contagious. When one person chooses thoughtful responses instead of impulsive reactions, the emotional atmosphere often shifts in the same direction. This does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending that challenges do not exist. Rather, it means allowing wisdom to guide emotion instead of allowing emotion to govern wisdom. The strongest communicators pause before responding, listen before defending, and seek understanding before reaching conclusions. That brief moment of self-control frequently determines whether a conversation becomes productive or destructive. Every pause creates space for better judgment, and every measured response strengthens credibility. Empathy gives emotional intelligence its greatest strength because it allows people to feel genuinely seen. Offering advice before understanding another person's experience often creates distance, whereas sincere empathy creates connection even before solutions are discussed. People naturally become more receptive when they believe their emotions have been acknowledged instead of dismissed. In that moment, communication ceases to be a contest of opinions and becomes a partnership built upon mutual respect. Influence born from empathy never feels forceful because it honors another person's dignity while gently expanding their perspective. It reminds us that lasting impact is created not by overpowering emotions, but by understanding them deeply enough to guide them towards hope, confidence, and meaningful action. Chapter 6. The Psychology of Everyday Persuasion. Influence reveals its greatest power not during extraordinary occasions, but within the ordinary conversations that quietly shape everyday life. A brief exchange before a meeting, a thoughtful response during a disagreement, a moment of encouragement offered to a colleague, or a sincere conversation around the dinner table may appear insignificant in isolation. Yet these seemingly routine interactions gradually define relationships, reputations, and opportunities. Many people imagine persuasion as a skill reserved for public speakers, successful negotiators, or influential leaders, overlooking the simple truth that every conversation subtly changes the direction of future ones. Every word either strengthens trust or weakens it. Every reaction either invites cooperation or creates resistance, and every decision to listen with patience or respond with understanding quietly shapes how others perceive us. Influence, therefore, is not an occasional performance, but a daily habit expressed through consistent behavior. The individuals who leave the deepest impression are rarely those who attempt to persuade everyone they meet. Instead, they create environments where people naturally feel respected, valued, and willing to contribute. Their greatest strength lies not in controlling conversations, but in guiding them with calm confidence and genuine curiosity. This understanding becomes especially valuable in professional environments where influence often carries greater weight than formal authority. A title may establish responsibility, yet it cannot automatically inspire commitment or loyalty. Teams willingly follow leaders who communicate with clarity, remain composed under pressure, and demonstrate genuine interest in the growth of others. Such leaders understand that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned repeatedly through fairness, consistency, and integrity. When employees feel their ideas are welcomed rather than dismissed, creativity flourishes because psychological safety replaces the fear of criticism. Conversations become opportunities for collaboration rather than competitions for recognition. A leader who asks thoughtful questions before offering conclusions often uncovers solutions that would have remained hidden beneath silence. In this way, influence transforms workplaces into communities where shared purpose becomes more powerful than individual ambition. The same principles quietly strengthen personal relationships. Family members, close friends, and partners rarely measure love through grand declarations alone. More often, they remember the patience shown during difficult moments, the willingness to listen without interruption, and the respect demonstrated even during disagreement. Persuasion within healthy relationships is never about winning arguments or proving superiority. It is about creating understanding that allows both people to move forward together. Every act of attentive listening communicates, without elaborate language, that another person's experiences and emotions matter. Such moments accumulate over time until trust becomes strong enough to withstand misunderstanding, disappointment, and change. Relationships built upon mutual respect require fewer persuasive words because confidence has already been established through consistent actions. Influence in everyday life therefore begins with the recognition that people are far more likely to embrace ideas offered with empathy than demands delivered with certainty. When conversations become expressions of partnership instead of persuasion, lasting influence ceases to be something we pursue and gradually becomes something we embody. The digital world has expanded the reach of communication, yet it has also magnified the importance of thoughtful influence. Messages now travel across continents within seconds, but speed should never replace sincerity. A hurried email, an impulsive social media comment, or a carelessly written message can shape perceptions just as powerfully as a face-to-face conversation. Influential communicators understand that every written interaction becomes part of their reputation, even when they are not physically present. They choose clarity over complexity, respect over reaction, and encouragement over unnecessary criticism because they recognize that tone is often interpreted through emotion rather than intention. In an age where misunderstandings can spread faster than explanations, the discipline of communicating with patience, precision, and empathy becomes an extraordinary advantage. The goal is never simply to be heard, but to leave every interaction with relationships stronger than they were before. Networking offers another powerful example of everyday persuasion, although it is frequently misunderstood as the pursuit of personal gain. Genuine influence grows through contribution long before it produces opportunity. The people who build the strongest professional and personal networks are those who consistently offer value without immediately expecting something in return. They remember names, celebrate the achievements of others, share useful ideas, and make thoughtful introductions because they understand that trust grows through generosity rather than transaction. Over time, these small acts create relationships founded on mutual respect instead of convenience. When opportunities eventually arise, people naturally think of those who have already demonstrated reliability, kindness, and integrity. Influence, therefore, becomes the quiet consequence of meaningful relationships rather than the result of calculated persuasion. Negotiation follows the same principle. Many imagine successful negotiators as individuals who dominate conversations or secure victory through relentless argument. Yet the most effective negotiators rarely pursue short-term wins at the expense of long-term trust. They seek outcomes that allow every person involved to leave with dignity intact. By listening carefully, acknowledging genuine concerns, and searching for shared objectives, they transform negotiation from confrontation into cooperation. This approach does not weaken influence. It strengthens it because people are far more willing to work with those who respect their interests instead of attempting to overpower them. Every successful agreement built upon fairness becomes the foundation for future collaboration, proving once again that sustainable influence always values relationships above temporary advantage. Ultimately, the psychology of everyday persuasion reminds us that our greatest opportunities are often hidden inside ordinary moments. Every greeting, every conversation, every disagreement, and every expression of gratitude quietly shapes the legacy we leave in the minds of others. Influence is not measured by the number of people who hear our words, but by the number who genuinely trust our intentions. It is built through patience when frustration would be easier, through understanding when judgment feels tempting, and through consistency when shortcuts appear attractive. These daily choices may seem modest, yet they accumulate with remarkable power, gradually shaping a reputation that opens doors no persuasive technique could ever unlock. When kindness becomes habitual, integrity becomes visible, and empathy becomes instinctive, influence ceases to feel like a skill that must be performed. It becomes a natural reflection of character. The most persuasive people are therefore not those who spend every conversation trying to change minds, but those who quietly improve every conversation they enter, leaving others more confident, more respected, and more hopeful than they were before a single word was spoken. Chapter 7. Handle resistance. Like an expert. Resistance is rarely a declaration of rejection. More often, it is an expression of uncertainty. Whenever people hesitate, question an idea, or refuse to move forward, they are usually protecting something they value rather than deliberately opposing the person standing before them. It may be their comfort, their confidence, their previous experiences, or simply their fear of making the wrong decision. Understanding this single truth changes the entire nature of persuasion. Instead of viewing resistance as an obstacle to defeat, you begin to recognize it as an invitation to understand another person's perspective more deeply. This shift transforms conversations from contests of opinion into opportunities for meaningful connection, where curiosity replaces confrontation and empathy takes the place of impatience. Many discussions fail because people become more interested in defending their own position than discovering why the other person thinks differently. The moment communication becomes a battle to prove who is right, genuine influence begins to disappear. Defensiveness narrows perception, making it difficult for anyone to consider a new perspective. Effective communicators avoid this trap by asking thoughtful questions instead of making immediate assumptions. A sincere question often reveals concerns that would never surface during an argument. Once those concerns are understood, solutions become easier to discover because people feel respected rather than challenged. Listening, therefore, is not a pause in persuasion. It is one of its most powerful expressions. Emotional discipline is equally important when facing resistance. Disagreement has a way of testing patience, yet emotional reactions rarely strengthen credibility. A calm response communicates confidence, while frustration often signals insecurity. The ability to remain composed under pressure reassures others that your convictions are guided by reason rather than impulse. This composure also creates space for productive dialogue, allowing difficult conversations to move towards understanding instead of conflict. Every pause before responding is an opportunity to replace instinct with wisdom and reaction with intention. Another powerful principle is the search for common ground. Even when opinions differ, people usually share broader goals such as security, growth, fairness, or success. Focusing on these shared objectives changes the emotional direction of a conversation. Instead of standing on opposite sides of an issue, both people begin working towards a solution that benefits everyone involved. Collaboration becomes possible because the conversation is no longer centered on winning, but on progressing together. Influence grows strongest when people feel they are solving a problem alongside you rather than defending themselves against you. Rejection should also be viewed through a different lens. Many individuals interpret rejection as a judgment of their worth, yet it is often nothing more than a reflection of timing, priorities, or circumstances beyond their control. Every accomplished leader, entrepreneur, author, and innovator has encountered resistance before achieving meaningful success. Their progress was not defined by avoiding rejection, but by learning from it without allowing it to diminish their confidence. Each objection contains information, each setback offers perspective, and each difficult conversation presents an opportunity to refine both communication and character. Resilience is therefore not the absence of resistance, but the ability to continue growing through it. The greatest persuaders understand that influence is never about overpowering another person's will. It is about creating enough trust that people willingly consider possibilities they had previously overlooked. Resistance should never be feared because it often marks the beginning of deeper understanding. When you approach disagreement with patience, emotional intelligence, and genuine respect, you replace tension with dialogue and uncertainty with confidence. In doing so, you discover that the most enduring influence is not achieved by forcing people to change their minds, but by helping them feel safe enough to change them for themselves. Chapter 8. Become the person. Everyone remembers. A memorable life is not measured by the number of conversations you have, but by the impression you leave behind after those conversations have ended. Long after specific words fade from memory, people continue to remember how you made them feel, how consistently you treated them, and whether your actions reflected the values you expressed. Influence that endures is never created through occasional brilliance or carefully crafted performances. It is built through character that remains steady in both moments of success and seasons of uncertainty. Reputation is formed quietly, strengthened by everyday choices that often go unnoticed, until one day it becomes the reason opportunities arrive before they are even requested. The most influential people understand that every interaction, no matter how brief, contributes another chapter to the story others tell about them. Charisma is often mistaken for a natural gift reserved for a fortunate few, yet genuine charisma has far less to do with personality than with presence. It is the ability to make others feel valued without seeking attention for oneself. A charismatic individual listens with genuine curiosity, speaks with thoughtful clarity, and carries quiet confidence that reassures rather than intimidates. They celebrate the achievements of others without jealousy, remain composed when circumstances become difficult, and treat every person with equal respect, regardless of status or influence. Such behavior creates an atmosphere where people naturally feel comfortable, appreciated, and inspired. This kind of charisma cannot be manufactured through rehearsed techniques because it grows from authenticity rather than appearance. Consistency is the bridge between intention and legacy. One inspiring conversation may be remembered for a day, but consistent integrity earns trust that lasts for years. People place their confidence in those whose actions repeatedly confirm their words. Small habits such as arriving prepared, keeping promises, admitting mistakes, expressing gratitude, and offering encouragement may appear ordinary, yet together they shape an extraordinary reputation. Excellence is rarely the result of dramatic moments. It is usually the quiet outcome of disciplined choices repeated over time. Every act of honesty strengthens credibility, every moment of humility deepens respect, and every decision to lead by example quietly expands influence. Humility gives lasting influence its greatest strength because it keeps success from becoming self-centered. Those who continue learning after achieving recognition remain relevant because they never assume they have reached the end of growth. They understand that leadership is not about collecting admiration, but about creating opportunities for others to succeed. The most respected individuals measure their achievements not only by personal accomplishments, but by the positive difference they make in the lives of those around them. Their influence multiplies because they invest in people instead of merely pursuing recognition. Becoming unforgettable is therefore not about attracting the most attention or delivering the most persuasive speech. It is about living with such integrity, kindness, confidence, and purpose that your presence leaves every person feeling stronger than before they met you. When your character consistently reflects empathy, reliability, wisdom, and genuine respect, influence becomes more than a communication skill. It becomes a natural extension of who you are. In the end, people may forget many of the words you spoke, but they will always remember the trust you inspired, the hope you awakened, and the example you chose to live. That is the kind of influence that outlives every conversation and becomes your greatest legacy. Conclusion. The greatest measure of influence has never been the volume of your voice or the number of people who agree with you. It is found in the quiet confidence you inspire, the trust you earn, and the positive difference your presence leaves behind long after every conversation has ended. Every chapter of this journey has pointed towards a single truth. Persuasion is not about controlling minds. It is about connecting hearts, understanding perspectives, and communicating with integrity. When influence is rooted in honesty and respect, it ceases to be a technique and becomes a reflection of character. Throughout this book, you have discovered that meaningful influence begins before words are spoken, grows through trust, is strengthened by thoughtful language, and flourishes through emotional intelligence. You have seen that resistance is not an enemy to overcome, but an opportunity to understand, and that lasting impact belongs to those who remain authentic even when circumstances become challenging. These principles are not reserved for extraordinary leaders or gifted communicators. They belong to anyone willing to practice them consistently, one conversation at a time. The real transformation begins now. Knowledge alone has never changed lives. Applied knowledge has. Every discussion with a colleague, every disagreement with a loved one, every opportunity to encourage a friend, and every chance to lead with humility becomes a new opportunity to practice what you have learned. Some conversations will unfold exactly as you hope, while others will test your patience and resilience. Welcome both. Success in persuasion is not measured by winning every conversation, but by becoming the kind of person people naturally trust, respect, and remember. There will always be louder voices, stronger opinions, and moments when choosing empathy over ego feels difficult. Yet history repeatedly reminds us that those who create the deepest and most enduring influence are not those who dominate every room, but those who elevate everyone within it. They listen before speaking, understand before judging, and build relationships before seeking results. Their influence endures because it is anchored in integrity rather than personal gain. As you close this book, remember that every conversation offers the chance to leave another person more hopeful, more confident, and more understood than before. Let your words reflect wisdom. Let your actions reinforce your values, and let your character become the strongest argument you will ever make. Speak with purpose, influence with integrity, and succeed by becoming the kind of person whose impact continues to grow long after the final words have been spoken. That is the highest form of persuasion, and it is a legacy that no circumstance can ever diminish.